Tonight, here's the headline in the New York Times. Quote, accused of echoing fascists, Trump campaign warns its critics will be, quote, crushed. Accused of echoing fascists? I mean, you either are echoing fascists or you aren't. Despite the sort of pulling the punch element of that headline, the sub-headline on that story tonight in the New York Times does get there a little more directly. The subhead says, quote, the former president likened political opponents to vermin, similar to the dehumanizing rhetoric wielded by dictators like Hitler and Mussolini. The Washington Post headline just got there more directly. Headline, Trump calls political enemies vermin, echoing dictators Hitler and Mussolini. The quote from Trump was this. He said, quote, we will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country, lie, steal, and cheat on elections, and will do anything possible, whether legally or illegally, to destroy America and the American dream. The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within. The threat from within, the vermin. The former president made these comments in a Veterans Day speech. They did not appear to be ad-libbed. They appeared to have been written as part of the speech in something he read off his teleprompter by all appearances. Even if by some chance they weren't in the teleprompter for that speech, he certainly made clear that he meant them for sure, and he meant them just like that when he put them in writing in a social media post that used the exact same language, that used that same word vermin after he delivered the speech in New Hampshire. And this is not subtle, right? I mean, everybody knows what this means. If you know one thing about mass murdering dictators in history, it's that they refer to the people they want to mass murder as vermin, pests, rats, insects, termites, right? Anything to make their followers see those people as something to be exterminated, not someone you might know. Professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who's the author of the book Strong Men, said today, quote, all of this is part of his effort to re-educate Americans to see violence as justified, patriotic, and even morally righteous. But to get people to lose their aversion to violence, savvy authoritarians also dehumanize their enemies. That is what Trump is doing. Trying to get people to lose their aversion, their natural aversion to violence. And this comes at a time when the Washington Post, of course, has recently reported that Trump's advisors are working on a plan to invoke the Insurrection Act on his first day in office, which would give him the power that the pro-Trump paramilitaries were calling for ahead of January 6th, and give him the power from day one to use the U.S. military, the U.S. Army, against American civilians on U.S. streets. It comes at a time when the New York Times is newly reporting, as of this weekend, that Trump's advisors are planning to build camps in the United States, camps capable of holding millions of people once he is back in office. They plan to put millions of people in camps in the United States. And they plan to do it using the military rather than by passing some new legislation that might make it seem legal. They plan to just do it unilaterally, again, using the military. Building camps to hold millions of people, using military force against your own people, saying your political opponents are vermin who must be rooted out and crushed to save the country. None of this is subtle. And apparently none of this is an accident. These things aren't being blurted out accidentally, right? They're in the speech. They're in the social media posts. These supposed plans for the new administration are being technically leaked. I mean, as of tonight, the Trump campaign put out a statement officially disavowing all reported plans. But these supposed leaks are also accompanied in many instances by on-the-record interviews with some of Trump's most senior advisors, people putting their name to it and explicitly confirming these plans. And just, again, to be clear, this talk about exterminating the vermin in this country was not an ad-lib. It's a repeated line now. He wants to be known for this. He wants everybody to know that this is the language he is using. And the fact that it's all happening at once, the reporting on the camps they're going to put people in, the military force against civilians, the vermin speech and all the statements about it, the fact that it is all happening at once presumably means it is not an accident, that they are rolling this out now on purpose. Because why? Because it's exciting to his followers, right? The transgressive thrill of yet more lines being crossed, more people being shocked and scared and insulted and offended. That's the transgressive thrill of Trump's radicalism. Yes, it's an effort to intimidate his opponents, but also to excite his followers, especially as he really does seem to be trying to get them excited about the possibility of cathartic violence against Trump's enemies. And he knows he's going to get called a fascist for talking this way, for proposing things like this. He's inviting it. And he's calling all of his opponents fascists too, trying to rob that word of its meaning. Call me a fascist, and then I'll call you a fascist, and then that word will become something that we throw around and it doesn't actually attach to anything real, and will thereby rob it of its power. Sure, call me a fascist. I'll call you a fascist too. I mean, that's where we are. And so here's the question. What is the institution in our country that is going to find that intolerable and that is going to see this as something that's happening on its patch, which it needs to fix? What is the institution that's going to feel the need to self-police when it comes to somebody speaking on their behalf like this, espousing these kinds of things, right? There's no church here to shut down a Father Coughlin or a Bishop Strickland in Texas. There's no judiciary to launch an ethics inquiry like you might of a judge. There's no criminal law springing into action here. As Americans, we of course have the constitutional right to espouse and say even the worst political ideas without committing a crime by doing so. There's no, bar association to yank his law license. There's no radio or TV network to say, we're not hosting your show anymore. What is the institution here that decides this is on their patch? What is the institution here that decides that you can never espouse things like this and also be part of them and also represent them? There is only one. It's his political party, which, when he is running to be the Republican nominee for president of the United States, means that he's contending to lead that party, while promising that he will build camps to hold millions of people in this country, and he will use the military against American civilians at home in America, and his political opponents are vermin who will be crushed and exterminated. That is the test here. That is the only, he's not running as an independent. He's not running as the Trump for president candidate. He is running as the Republican. He wants to be the Republican nominee for president. And so that is the only institution. That is the institution that is being tested here. This is him testing the political party that he says he's going to lead, testing them now, 1 year out from the election, to see what they will tolerate as an institution. Which means every single member of that party will now have to answer whether this is who they are, whether this is what they stand for, whether this is the cause of their party. We know from history that a country under threat does not stand up for itself amorphously with some sort of inchoate civic objection that just redounds to the population at large. It works that way like in fiction and poetry. In real life, a country under threat stands up for itself when the institutions that make up the civic and political life of that country stand up and say what they are for and what they can no longer stand. There is only one institution in this country that is implicated by what he is doing, and he is testing them. And that is the point where we are now. He has forced it there. What now?